They said I was past my bonding age. Now the alpha refuses to bond with anyone but me. Alara had always been different. In the small village of Winter Hollow, where snow blanketed the earth for half the year and the wind whispered secrets through the bare trees, she walked a lonely path. Her hair was the color of midnight, and her eyes shimmered with a strange light that most villagers called unnatural. From the day she was born, the elders had whispered that her family line was marked by something old, something powerful, but she had been told she was too late. Too late to bond with an alpha, too late to find the kind of connection that could define her life. By the time she reached her 25th year, the whispers had grown into outright ridicule. Past your bonding age, the village girls would say with thin smiles. No alpha would ever choose you now. Men avoided her gaze. Children watched her with curiosity that made her cheeks burn. Alara learned to smile through the sting of rejection, to wrap herself in solitude as one would a warm cloak against the harsh winter. Yet she did not resent the village. There was a quiet dignity in her life, a sense that perhaps her path was meant to be different. She wandered the edges of Silverwood Forest daily, collecting herbs and studying the patterns of snow and shadow. The forest had always felt alive to her in ways that people did not understand. Whispering leaves, the soft tread of unseen creatures, the shimmer of frost in impossible shapes, it was as if the land itself recognized her presence. One morning, as the sky turned a cold lavender, Alara noticed movement near the forest's edge. A shadow slipped between the pines with the grace of a wolf, yet the shape was taller, broader, almost human. She froze, her breath clouding the air before her. The figure paused, and then she saw him. Kale, the alpha of the region, a being both feared and revered. He was said to be immortal, a warrior whose power was whispered to rival the gods. Few had ever seen him up close, and even fewer survived the encounter with their stories intact. He stood there, cloaked in darkness, his eyes like pale moons that pierced through the morning mist. And for reasons she could not name, he looked at her. Her heart beat faster than it had in years, not with fear but with an unfamiliar recognition, a thread tugging at her soul that had lain dormant for far too long. Kale's gaze lingered longer than politeness or caution required. Then he turned away, and the shadow of his figure disappeared into the dense forest. The day passed in a blur. The village prepared for the Festival of the Bonded, a sacred celebration in which young humans who were chosen by alphas would be honored. Alara remained in the back, unnoticed by most. She did not care for the fanfare or the songs. Yet, as drums and flutes echoed through the snow-laden streets, she could not shake the feeling that today was different. By nightfall, a storm rolled in, heavy clouds blotting out the stars. The festival reached its climax at the edge of Silverwood, where a ceremonial fire was meant to awaken the spirits that watched over the village. Villagers gathered, faces flushed with excitement and fear. Then from the depths of the forest came a scream, a sound that froze hearts and turned blood to ice. A wolf-like creature, enormous and unnatural, emerged from the tree line. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and smoke seemed to coil from its fur. Villagers scattered in terror, children crying and the elders shouting prayers to unseen deities. Alara, rooted in place, felt a strange pulse beneath her skin, as if the forest itself called to her. Before she could think, Kale appeared. He moved like a shadow unbound, faster than any human could hope. With a single gesture, he hurled a surge of energy that struck the beast, sending it sprawling into the snow. The villagers gasped, but Kale's attention did not waver from her. "Alara," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper, though the wind carried it clearly to her. "Step back." She wanted to step back, to vanish into the throng of frightened villagers, but her feet remained stubbornly planted. The pulse in her chest grew, strange and undeniable. Something between them had shifted. The wolf lunged again, and Kale moved to intercept it, but then he faltered, as if the creature itself sensed the connection between them. Instinct took over. Alara ran forward, hands trembling, and placed herself between the alpha and the wolf. The moment her fingers brushed the air where Kale's magic lingered, a spark shot between them, visible as a faint blue light that danced across the snow. The wolf recoiled, howled, and then vanished into the mist, leaving the village trembling in silence. Kale's eyes were wide now, pale moons widening in shock. He lowered his hand slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "How?" he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. "No one, not in centuries, has done that." Alara's voice came out soft, uncertain. I don't know. I just felt it." The villagers murmured among themselves, fear and awe mingling in their eyes. Yet the festival, the songs, the lights, none of it mattered to Alara. All she could feel was the pull of Kale's gaze, the recognition of something she had never dared to hope for. After the chaos, Kale retreated to the shadows, as if the very act of standing near her had exhausted him. But before disappearing completely, he turned and muttered something that chilled her more than the winter wind. "She carries a bond I thought lost to time." Alara's heart raced, confusion and wonder swirling in equal measure. A bond. With him, it was impossible. She had been told she was past her bonding age, that no alpha would ever choose her. Yet here he was, acknowledging her presence as if it were the only thing that mattered in the world. The night passed with heavy snowfall, and the village slowly returned to its uneasy routines. Yet Alara could not sleep. Her mind replayed every glance, every word, every spark of magic that had connected her to Kale. Something had awakened within her, a quiet, powerful certainty that her life was no longer her own. Something larger, older, and dangerous was calling her. At dawn, she ventured to the forest's edge once more. Snow crunched under her boots, and the air smelled of frost and pine. Shadows stretched long between the trees, and the whispering wind seemed to speak her name. She stepped carefully, aware that this was no longer a place of simple herbs and solitude. Something lived here, something ancient, something that wanted her. And then between the trees she saw him again. Kale, standing as if waiting. Not for her to follow, but for her to decide. His pale eyes held centuries of authority, and yet, for the first time, a flicker of uncertainty. "Ilara," he said, the word like a command and a question all at once. "Do you understand what you are?" She shook her head, though her heart hammered with understanding she could not name. I think so, but why me?" Kale's expression was unreadable, but his eyes softened just for a moment. "Because you are the one I cannot refuse, and that has not happened before." The forest seemed to hold its breath. Snow fell silently around them, the world hushed, waiting. Alara realized then that nothing in her life had been ordinary, and nothing would ever be ordinary again. The alpha who was meant to bond with no one had found her. And she had found him. But the danger that had stirred the wolf would not rest. Something darker, older than the village, something that had slumbered beneath the frost and ice, had noticed the awakening. And as Alara stepped closer to Kale, feeling the spark of their connection grow, she did not know if she was ready for what was coming. A shadow moved in the trees behind her, not quite wolf, not quite human, watching, waiting. Alara felt the pulse in her chest tighten. Whatever lay ahead, it would test them both. Their bond, fragile, impossible, and yet undeniable, was only beginning. And in that moment, as the wind whispered through the frost-laden branches and Kale's hand hovered near hers, Alara understood one thing. Her life had changed forever. The frost clung to Winter Hollow like a silken veil as dawn broke over the snow-laden village. Alara awoke with the memory of Kale's eyes still burning in her mind. She had thought of nothing else all night. Their connection, the spark that had leapt between them, and the shadow in the forest that had watched her from the darkness. She tried to tell herself it was impossible. Alphas were immortal, powerful, and bound by centuries of rules. No one, no human, had ever stirred one like that. And yet she had. Alara wandered to the edge of Silverwood Forest, her breath forming clouds in the cold morning air. The snow crunched under her boots, each step a sharp echo in the quiet dawn. The trees loomed tall and dark, their bare branches scratching against the gray sky. Somewhere deep within, she felt the pulse of magic, faint but insistent, calling to her. A sudden movement made her stop. Kale stepped out from the shadows, his form nearly blending with the forest itself. He moved with the grace of a predator, yet there was a tension to his posture she had never seen before. His pale eyes were fixed on her, unyielding yet filled with something unreadable. "Alara," he said, his voice low and steady, "you should not have come alone." She met his gaze without flinching. "I cannot stay away." Not when I feel this," she said, gesturing between them. "I don't understand it, but it is real." Kale's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Real, yes, but dangerous." Alara frowned. "Dangerous because of me." "Because of both of us," he admitted. "What lies within you, what connects you to me, it has not been seen in centuries. It awakens power that most are not ready to face. And yet," his eyes lingered on hers, "I cannot turn away." They stood in silence, the forest around them holding its breath. The snow fell lightly, dusting Alara's dark hair, and she felt an almost unbearable weight of destiny pressing down upon her. It was not just a connection. They were bound by something ancient, something neither fully understood. Kale finally spoke again, his voice quieter, almost a whisper carried by the wind. "I must take you to the stronghold. There you will learn the truth. But you must follow my rules, or this bond, this power could destroy you." Alara nodded. Fear and excitement coursed through her in equal measure. She had always known her life was meant for something more than the village, but she had never imagined it would be like this, stepping into a world of magic, danger, and an alpha who refused to let her go. The journey to the stronghold was silent. Kale led her through the dense forest, moving with a speed and precision that left her breathless. Every so often, his gaze would flicker toward her, and she could feel the pull of the bond like a thread tugging at her chest. She did not understand it, but she did not resist. The stronghold rose suddenly from the forest, carved from black stone that glistened faintly in the early light. Towers spiraled into the sky, and banners marked with the insignia of alphas fluttered in the wind. It was magnificent, intimidating, and ancient, a place that seemed untouched by time. Inside, the air was warmer but filled with a tension she could almost taste. Alphas moved through the halls with commanding presence, their eyes sharp and watchful. Kale led her to a private chamber, heavy with the scent of old parchment and burning candles. "You must understand," Kale began, turning to face her. "The bond between an alpha and a human is sacred. It is not merely choice or desire, it is destiny. And your family, your lineage, carries a power long thought lost. That is why the bond finds you even now." Alara shook her head, struggling to absorb the weight of his words. "My family, I don't know what you mean." Kale's gaze softened. "Your bloodline is tied to the original guardians of this realm. They were humans who could channel magic in ways that even alphas cannot. You were born with that potential, but it remained dormant until now." Alara swallowed hard. Her whole life she had felt different, isolated, almost like an invisible thread connected her to something she could not name. Now it made sense, but the knowledge was frightening. "You mean the spark between us, it's not just magic. It's me?" she asked. "Yes," Kale said, his voice firm yet tender. "It is you and it is me. We are linked by something older than any alpha, and it is rare, it is dangerous." Alara stepped closer, drawn to him despite the fear that tugged at her heart. "Then why are you here? Why do you look at me like that?" Kale's expression was unreadable for a moment. Then he stepped closer, so close that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Because," he said slowly, "you are the only one I can see. The only one I could ever bond with, and I cannot refuse it. I have never felt this before, not in centuries of life." The words sent a shiver down her spine. She had imagined what it would be like to be seen, to be chosen. But this was beyond anything she could have dreamed. And yet she felt the danger, the unspoken rules, the weight of centuries pressing down on them both. Kale turned suddenly, drawing her attention to a large map spread across a table. Strange symbols marked the edges of the kingdom, glowing faintly in the candlelight. "There is a rival alpha," he said, voice tight with tension. "One who covets power beyond reason. He knows of our bond and he will not hesitate to challenge it. He will come for you, for us. You must be ready." Alara's heart raced. Danger had always been a story in books and tales, but now it was real. And Kale, the alpha who had seemed untouchable, stood before her, vulnerable only in the way he acknowledged her. I will be ready," she said, though her voice trembled. "I don't understand it all yet, but I will face whatever comes." Kale studied her, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You will need more than courage. You will need control and knowledge of the power you carry. The bond amplifies both our strengths and our weaknesses. If you cannot master it, it could consume you." Alara nodded again. "Then teach me." For hours they trained in the great hall of the stronghold. Kale demonstrated how magic flowed through the bond, how their connection could be harnessed, and how it reacted to emotions. Each time their hands brushed, a spark leapt between them, startling both. With every movement, every shared glance, Alara could feel herself drawn deeper into Kale's world and into his life. As night fell, Kale finally stopped, breathing heavily. The bond pulsed between them like a living thing, responding to the tension, the fear, the excitement. He looked at her then, and for a moment the world outside the stronghold ceased to exist. "You feel it too, don't you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Alara's lips parted and she nodded. "Yes, I can feel you, everything, like it's part of me." Kale's hand hovered near hers, but he did not touch her. "That is the bond awakening. It will grow stronger." And yet, his gaze darkened. "There are forces that will try to sever it, to destroy it before it can reach its full potential. They will come. You must be prepared to face them." Alara felt a chill run down her spine. She had known danger, yes, in stories and in whispers of the forest. But now it was real, looming on the horizon, tied to her connection with Kale. And yet, despite the fear, a part of her could not imagine turning back. She was no longer the girl who had been overlooked, the one deemed past her age. She had been chosen. By Kale. By destiny. A sudden knock at the door interrupted their quiet tension. Kale's expression hardened. "It begins," he said, moving toward the entrance with a predator's grace. Outside, a messenger from the rival Alpha had arrived, bearing a warning written in blood-red ink. "If the bond is not broken, Winter Hollow will burn," the note read. Alara's heart pounded. The danger was closer than she had imagined. And yet, as she looked at Kale, standing tall and unyielding despite the threat, she realized one thing: she would not face it alone. The bond had awakened. And now, there was no turning back. The night air was sharp and biting as Alara crouched near the edge of the silverwood, watching the flickering shadows of the rival Alpha's forces move through the forest. The snow crunched beneath her boots with every cautious step, and the cold wind carried whispers that seemed to twist her name. The bond with Kale pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat she could feel in her chest. Kale had remained close just behind her, his presence both protective and commanding. Yet the tension between them had shifted since the note arrived. He was quieter now, more measured, almost distant, and she could sense the weight of centuries pressing down on him. The bond that had sparked between them days ago was no longer gentle. It burned with urgency, its strength intertwined with danger. "Alara," Kale murmured, his voice rough with tension, "you must stay close. They are skilled and they will not hesitate to strike." She nodded, swallowing hard. "I'm not afraid, not when you are here." His gaze flickered over her, the hint of a smile briefly breaking the stoicism in his face. "Brave words," he said, "but courage alone will not save you." They moved through the forest in silence, following paths known only to Kale. The trees loomed tall, dark sentinels in the moonlight, and shadows seemed to twist and stretch with an unnatural life. Every so often, Alara felt a tug in the bond, a warning of movement just beyond her sight. As they reached a clearing, Kale suddenly stopped. His posture stiffened, and the air itself seemed to grow heavier. "They are here," he whispered. From the shadows, figures emerged, humans and twisted creatures alike, their eyes glowing faintly red, their presence radiating dark intent. The rival Alpha had brought forces beyond mere soldiers. Magic pulsed in the air, and Alara could feel the bond with Kale reacting violently, tugging her closer to him, warning her of danger. "Stay behind me," Kale commanded, drawing his blade, which shimmered with a faint blue light. Alara hesitated, but instinct took over. She raised her hands, focusing on the pulse in her chest. A faint glow appeared, matching the hue of Kale's blade. The connection between them flared, and the attackers recoiled as if sensing the strength they could not yet face. Kale's eyes widened. "You are stronger than I realized," he said, almost in awe. Alara swallowed, trying to calm the rapid thrum of her heart. I feel it. I can help." The rival Alpha's forces advanced, moving like shadows over the snow. Kale met them with precision and speed, each strike a blur of motion. Alara followed, her magic weaving between them, amplifying Kale's power in ways neither fully understood. Together they moved as one, an unbroken force, but the strain was visible. Suddenly a figure stepped forward from the darkness, the rival Alpha himself. His presence radiated cold authority, and the air seemed to tremble with his power. His gaze locked on Kale, then flickered to Alara. "So," he said, his voice smooth and cruel, "the legendary Alpha finally finds someone to bond with, and yet she is too young, too weak, and you are far too old to make her yours." Kale's jaw tightened. "She is mine," he said, voice low and dangerous, "and I will not let you harm her." The rival Alpha's lips curved into a sinister smile. "We shall see," he said. With a motion of his hand, the snow around them twisted violently, forming dark tendrils that surged toward Alara. Kale moved to shield her, but the force struck him with a power that staggered even him. Alara felt the bond flare wildly, the magic between them reacting to the danger. She reached for him instinctively, and the surge of their shared power created a shockwave that sent the attackers reeling. For a moment, it seemed victory was within their reach. But the rival Alpha was clever, striking at the bond itself. Shadows wrapped around Kale and Alara, separating them physically and mentally. Alara stumbled back, gasping as the connection between them flickered like a dying flame. "Kale!" she cried, panic rising in her chest. He gritted his teeth, his hand reaching for her, but the shadows twisted the bond, making it painful to draw near. He fell to one knee, and for the first time Alara saw fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. "You must trust yourself," he said through clenched teeth. "The bond, it can still protect us if you let it." Alara closed her eyes, focusing on the pulse she felt deep in her chest. She remembered his voice, the moments they had shared, the spark that had first flared between them in the forest. Slowly, deliberately, she let the connection guide her, letting it flow outward toward him. The bond flared with blinding light, and the shadows that had twisted around them recoiled with a hiss. Kale fell forward, clutching his head as if the surge of energy threatened to overwhelm him. But Alara held firm, drawing the magic into herself, channeling it with care and precision she had never imagined she possessed. Finally, the light faded, leaving both of them panting, the snow around them disturbed and scarred from the battle. Kale rose slowly, his eyes meeting hers, and for a brief moment there was no tension, no danger, only understanding. "You saved me," he said, voice soft, almost incredulous. Alara shook her head, a small smile on her lips. "No, we saved each other." He reached for her hand, and the bond pulsed warmly, the connection stronger than ever before. For a moment they simply stood there, breath mingling in the cold night air, the forest holding its silence as if in respect for what had just occurred. But the victory was short-lived. A faint whisper drifted through the trees, barely audible, yet unmistakable. The rival Alpha's voice, or some echo of his power, spoke from the shadows. "This is far from over." Kale stiffened, and Alara felt the first prickling unease in her chest. The danger was not gone, it had only been delayed. Days passed after the battle, and the stronghold became a place of preparation. Kale taught Alara to refine the bond, to channel magic without losing herself, to control the surge that had nearly overwhelmed them both. Each lesson drew them closer, their connection deepening beyond mere power. They shared moments of quiet conversation, rare laughter, and the unspoken warmth that passed between them in glances and small touches. Yet Kale remained haunted. There were nights when he stared at the horizon, silent and distant, and Alara could feel his tension radiating through the bond. "What are you thinking?" she asked one night, as they trained in the Hall of Shadows, their breaths forming clouds in the cold air. "Of what comes next," he said, voice heavy. "And of you. This bond, it is not simple. It will demand everything of us, and I cannot lose you." Alara's heart ached at his words. She reached out, placing her hand over his, feeling the warmth of life and magic flowing through the bond. "Then we face it together," she whispered. "No matter what comes." Kale's eyes softened, and for the first time he allowed himself a small, almost vulnerable smile. But even as they stood together, the shadows whispered from beyond the stronghold walls. Forces older and darker than they could name had noticed the awakening. The rival Alpha had only been a herald, a warning of what was to come. The bond between them, strong and alive, pulsed in response to the hidden danger. Alara felt it deep in her chest, a reminder that their connection was more than magic. It was a lifeline, fragile yet unbreakable, binding them not just by choice, but by destiny. One evening, as the snow fell silently outside the high windows of the stronghold, Kale led Alara to the cliffs overlooking Silverwood. The moon hung low, casting silver light over the forest below, and the wind carried a sense of warning. "You must understand," Kale said, his voice calm but firm, "the bond has limits. It can protect us, yes, but it also exposes us. They will try to sever it to break the connection. You must be ready for that, because when it happens, it will test everything we have." Alara's fingers tightened around his. "I am ready," she said, though doubt fluttered in her chest. "I will not let them take you from me." Kale's eyes softened, and he brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. "I have never trusted anyone like this, and yet I have no choice. You are part of me now, whether I wish it or not." A sudden chill swept over them, and the bond flared sharply. Alara gasped as a shadow shifted among the trees below. Something unseen, dark, and ancient had approached, drawn by the bond they shared. Kale's hand moved to hers instinctively, anchoring them both. "It begins," he said, voice low and tense. "The true test." Alara looked into his eyes and felt both fear and determination. Their bond had survived the rival Alpha's first strike, but this, whatever waited in the shadows, was older, darker, and more dangerous. And as they prepared to face it, she understood one truth. The bond between them was not just a connection of magic. It was a test of trust, courage, and the unspoken promise that neither would face the darkness alone. The blood moon rose high over Silverwood, casting a crimson glow across the frozen forest. The wind carried an unnatural chill, bending the snow-laden branches and whispering secrets that made the hairs on Alara's neck stand. She stood at the edge of the cliffs with Kale, their hands intertwined, feeling the pulse of the bond stronger than ever. The bond had grown with every trial, every brush with danger, and now it sang through her veins like a living thing. "Are you ready?" Kale asked, his voice steady, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of concern. Alara nodded, her resolve firm. "As ready as I will ever be." We face it together. Below, the dark force waited. Shadows swirled unnaturally among the trees, shapes impossible to name. The rival Alpha had returned, stronger, more cunning, commanding the magic of older, forgotten powers. The air seemed to hum with anticipation, as if the forest itself held its breath. Kale stepped forward, his blade drawn. Its faint blue glow illuminated the crimson snow, reflecting in his pale eyes. "Remember," he said softly, "the bond is our strength. Do not fight separately. Let it guide you." Alara took a deep breath and felt the pulse of their connection. It was no longer just magic. It was trust, understanding, and something far deeper. She had grown in ways she could never have imagined. She could feel Kale's strength, his fears, his will, and in return he could feel her courage, her determination, and the untapped power that had lain dormant for generations. The dark forces surged forward. Figures emerged from the shadows, twisted, ghostly, and human alike, spinning into a wave of menace that pressed closer with every step. Alara felt her pulse quicken. The bond flared and energy spiraled around them, protective yet demanding, as if the forest itself had chosen them as its guardians. Kale moved first, a blur of silver-blue light and steel, cutting through the dark figures with precise strikes. Alara followed, channeling her magic through the bond, amplifying his power. Each movement, each motion was in perfect harmony. The rival Alpha watched from a distance, calculating, waiting for the moment to strike where the bond was vulnerable. But the bond could not be broken so easily. Suddenly, the shadows coalesced into a massive, formless shape, a swirling mass of darkness that pulsed like a heartbeat. It surged toward them more than mere soldiers. It was the essence of the curse that had haunted Winter Hollow for generations. Kale braced himself, but the force struck with a power that made the ground quake. He faltered, and for a heartbeat, fear glimmered in his eyes. "Alara," he shouted. Her hands glowed with light and she reached out through the bond, her energy meeting his. The connection flared violently, illuminating the cliffs and the forest below. The dark mass screamed, recoiling from the surge of their shared power. Alara drew strength from Kale and he drew strength from her, the bond a conduit of force, uniting them in ways the enemy could not anticipate. "Focus on me," Kale yelled, his voice carrying over the roar of the dark magic. Alara nodded, letting every fear, every doubt, every hesitation fall away. She felt the energy of generations flow through her, her ancestors' courage, their will, their hope. She was no longer the outcast of Winter Hollow. She was the chosen, the one who could awaken the Alpha's full power. The dark mass shrieked and lunged again, but together they struck. Kale's blade met Alara's magic, a pulse of light exploding outward, scattering the shadow into fragments that vanished like mist. For a moment, the forest was still, the snow settling around them like a blanket of peace. But the rival Alpha was not done. He stepped forward, his form tall and imposing, the malevolence in his eyes cold and calculating. "So, the bond is stronger than I expected," he said, his voice like ice. "But strength alone will not save you." Kale moved to protect Alara, but she placed her hand on his chest, stopping him. "We are stronger together. We face him now, not separately." Kale's eyes softened, filled with trust in something unspoken, love, hope, and the unbreakable certainty of their bond. Together, they advanced. The rival Alpha struck with spells older than memory, dark energy that twisted reality itself, but the bond held them steady. Alara raised her hands, channeling the pulse of the bond into a focused wave of energy. Kale mirrored her movements, their powers intertwining in perfect harmony. The rival Alpha staggered back, momentarily overwhelmed. The ground shook and the wind carried their combined energy through the forest. "Now, Kale," Alara shouted. With a fierce roar, Kale charged, blade glowing with the bond's energy. Alara's magic met the tip of his sword, sending a beam of light that struck the rival Alpha directly. He let out a scream that echoed across the cliffs, then crumpled, defeated but not destroyed. The shadows that had swirled around him dissolved into the night, vanishing into the wind. The forest fell silent. The snow reflected the glow of the blood moon, and the world seemed to breathe again. Alara and Kale stood together, their hands still clasped, their bond strong and unbroken. Kale looked at her, eyes soft and vulnerable, a stark contrast to the Alpha the world had known. You were amazing," he said, his voice low. "I did not know anyone could do what you just did, not in centuries." Alara felt warmth flood through her, not from the cold but from the closeness of the man who had become her anchor. "We did it together," she said softly. "You were never alone." For a long moment they simply stood there, watching the crimson moon reflect in the snow, the silence a balm after the storm of power and danger. The bond pulsed gently, a steady rhythm, reminding them that they were linked not just by magic, but by trust and choice. Kale finally released a breath he had been holding, his shoulders relaxing. "The curse, it is broken," he said, "and the rival Alpha, he will not threaten this village again, at least not for a long time." Alara smiled faintly. "We made a good team." He reached for her hand, drawing it to his lips. "More than that," he said softly, "you are part of me now, and I would never let you go." Her heart ached at the tenderness in his voice. "I would never leave you," she whispered. "Not now, not ever." They stood on the cliffs, the wind carrying away the remnants of darkness, the bond between them pulsing like a quiet heartbeat. For the first time, Alara felt truly seen, truly chosen. The outcast who had been too late for her destiny had become the center of it, and she had awakened a power and a love that neither time nor danger could undo. Days passed, and Winter Hollow began to recover. The villagers spoke in hushed tones of the Alpha and the human who had defeated the shadowed forces, marveling at their strength. Alara returned to her home, but it no longer felt like the place where she had been ignored. The forest welcomed her as one of its own, and the bond with Kale remained a living presence in her heart. Kale stayed at the stronghold, but they spent every moment together that they could. Their bond was more than magic. It was understanding, trust, and the unspoken promise of protection. The danger had passed, but the lessons remained. They had survived the shadows because they faced them as one, and they had learned that true strength was not in solitude, but in connection. One quiet night, Kale led Alara to the cliffs again, the blood moon replaced by a rising sun that painted the snow gold. "We have survived," he said, his eyes reflecting the dawn, "and yet I feel that our journey is only beginning." Alara nodded, feeling the bond pulse warmly in her chest. "Then we will face it together. Whatever comes, we face it together." He pulled her close, the bond between them steady and unyielding. "I never thought I could feel like this again," Kale admitted. "After centuries, you have awakened something I thought lost forever." "And you have awakened me," Alara whispered, pressing her forehead to his. "I am no longer the girl who was past her bonding age. I am this, I am us." The wind carried their words across the snow-covered forest, over the cliffs, and into the world beyond. The shadows had been defeated, the bond had been tested, and two hearts had found each other in a destiny older than time itself. As they looked toward the horizon, a faint whisper of the wind stirred the trees. It was a reminder that the world was vast and full of mysteries, and that destiny was never fully tamed. But for now, in the warmth of the rising sun and the steady pulse of their bond, Kale and Alara stood together, unbroken, unafraid, and ready for whatever the future might hold.